Now, folks, we want to take you to Florida now, where the sentencing phase in the knocking neighbor shooting trial is underway. In August, a jury convicted Susan Lorincz of shooting and killing her neighbor, Ajike Owens, back in June of last year.
Owens had gone to Lorintz's home after Lorincz threw a roller skate at one of Owens' children. Lorincz faces up to 30 years in prison. Now she is speaking. Let's go in to hear from this convicted felon.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I'm making a statement so you understand my actions and my reasoning the night of the shooting. My medical disabilities. I've had 25 knee surgeries on my right knee. I ended up having multiple replacements and then a catastrophic failure due to an allergy. I went back to having another knee replacement, and I was burned during surgery. And so I had gotten very ill, and my knee literally goes backwards. I had a laminectomy of my lumbar spine from the accident in 2019. I was back-ended at a stoplight, and there was a horrible complication. My dura from my spinal cord actually healed onto my actual spine. So when they went to do the correction, give it a little more space, the dura tore. I was leaking cerebral spinal fluid, and he had to do an actual spinal cord repair. They didn't know if I would walk again from that. I've also had left with nerve damage to my lower legs and feet and have diminished feeling and numbness. And I've fallen twice because of this. And I fell the first time in 2019 and had sustained internal injuries. I had bruised my lung and I had gotten a ganglion cyst on my right wrist. The second fall was November 2022. I fell because I walked into a bathroom, the light was supposed to come on and it never came on, and there was a toilet paper roll with the actual cylinder inside. And so it rolled out from under my foot and I fell backwards. And I had torn my rotator cuff and muscles in my left shoulder. The 2019 accident also impacted my cervical spine, and I lost feeling in my hands and had to have therapy. I had horrible migraines, terrible neck pain, and I was going through all this. And so I also have cataracts in both eyes, and the one on my left is progressing faster, so it looks like I'm going through Vaseline on a lens. And I have some heart issues and high blood pressure. And there's a reason why I'm telling you all this. I have carpal tunnel in both hands and muscle loss and diminished gripping capabilities. The first time I encountered Miss Owens was February of 2022. I was about 7 weeks after the neck fusion, and she basically attacked me. And she threw the sign at me, and I thought, what is going on here? I didn't expect to be confronted like that. And I had a huge red scar on my neck at that point in time, and she's screaming at me, and she keeps coming closer and closer and closer. I'm backing up, and then she's trying to rip the cell phone out of my hands. Finally, I had to, say, you're trespassing, you really need to leave. And I still have the red overshoot. I've never ever dealt with someone who was that violent that quickly. And so I was terrified of this woman, literally terrified. I've never had anyone, the first time I've met them, throw something at me and get so physically abusive. And, sorry. People are saying I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid. I was horrified. And when she was banging on that door, it was just so loud in the house. I could not hear what she was screaming. And then I found out the children, who said they were right there, actually were around the corner of the apartment, over 100 feet away. How could they hear anything? So I don't understand. And the prosecutors knew the children lied. They found the children in the lines. They said I threw skates and I hit them. That never happened. The prosecutor knows that didn't happen. That's why the charges were dropped. I've just been flummoxed about this whole case. I don't understand. You know, I understand I have PTSD, but this woman kept coming after me, I had approached her because I was watering my plants, and she's going, "Oh, there's a crazy old white lady." And I'm like, you can't just go around saying someone's crazy. I mean, it was insanity. So I went to say something to her, and she verbally attacked me again. She's like, you've been calling my kids racist names and stuff. And I said, no, ma'am, I have not. And she kept getting angrier and angrier. The more I said no, the angrier she got. So finally I said, I was terrified. I mean, she went from a very relaxed position to a position here. I could see her neck veins starting to bulge. Her pulse is really getting, fast. And I'm thinking, she's going to beat the hell out of me right here in the street. So I said, listen, I'm sorry. If that's what you think I said, I'm very sorry. I don't mean to offend anybody. I didn't say it, but I'm sorry. I went to walk away, and she's following 1 foot behind me the whole time to my apartment till I slammed the door in the face. Again, never had anyone do anything that aberrant in my life. Like I said, it's been a nightmare. Then Detective Smith says that Isaac had come, was one of the 3 children. I told him no, but he still put it in the report that this child was there. The child was never there. I have never spoken in my life to Isaac. I just haven't. I knew him by his association with his mother. Never spoke to the other little girl, and never spoke to the little boy Titus. Israel, I did speak to. He has been unbelievably rude, and it was a few days before Christmas 2022, and he was trespassing, and I'm like, you need to leave, you're trespassing. And so he turns to me, he says, you're old, you're white, you're all alone, nobody cares about you, you're worthless. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't expect this from a 9-year-old child. And so I said, you know what, we come into this world alone, we leave this world alone, get used to being alone. And he left. And next thing I know, she comes back, and she's screaming and banging on my door. I'm like, what in the world is going on? You can't talk to my child that way. I said, ma'am, you need to leave. And so she was banging and banging. She breaks the door frame. She broke it so much that she bent the actual strike plate. And I couldn't lock the door, and I couldn't open the door correctly. I was like, if she's going to do that to my door frame and break a metal piece, what is she going to do to me? I also have from that same fall when I was on the toilet paper, I have an aneurysm on my left kidney artery.
We need to take that break now. When we come back, we hear the rest of her plea for leniency. Keep it here on your front row seat to justice.
On closing arguments, Brian Camp claims self-defense in the fatal shooting of his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend, and now he knows his fate. We'll bring you reaction to today's verdict.
Closing arguments tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
What happened that night? Are you not prepared to take responsibility for any of your crimes?
Interview with a killer. Marathon starting Thursday, 11/10 Central. Only on Court TV. To donate today.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. Michael Ayala here with Judge Ashley Wilcott. We want to get you back now to the sentencing phase in the knocking neighbor shooting trial. In August, the jury convicted Susan Lorincz of shooting and killing her neighbor, Ajike Owens, back in June of last year.
Lorincz is wrapping up her plea for leniency to the judge, really going back through everything and why it happened and how it happened. Let's get you back inside the courtroom.
I also have from that same fall when I was on the toilet paper, I have an aneurysm on my left kidney artery. I'm not supposed to be getting excited. I'm not supposed to have high blood pressure. This woman is terrorizing me. I mean, she is absolutely terrorizing me. If she hits me, she will kill me. Literally, she will kill me. I will bleed out internally. I will exsanguinate. So was I terrified? Absolutely. And just as far as the kids saying I said racial slurs to them, it never happened. I just never said them. I have never talked to London. I have never talked to Calix, Jareth, or I can't remember the kid's name, but Isaac was the other one. I have never spoken to him. Isaac I knew. The other three I would never have known they even lived in my neighborhood. As far as the child Israel's concerned, he said I called him a slave. I have never called anyone a slave in my life. Not an adult, not a child, just something I wouldn't do. And to say that I called him the N-word is ridiculous. I've never called anyone the N-word. And I don't know where he's getting this from. I don't understand. I was married to a non-white man. He was actually Middle Eastern, brown skin. I would never do that to a child, ever. And I sang professionally in New York. I did jazz and the blues. I sang for Charles Gamble, Ernie Susser, and I had voice coach Jim Gassett, who had people in Dreamgirls, Miss Saigon, Les Mis, and I sang with Larry Woodard from the Metropolitan Opera. Larry is black. Charles is black. Our pianist was black. Most of the girls who sang the blues and did jazz were all black. I never had a problem with a black person in my life. This is not about race. And I actually love children. I have taught horseback riding lessons, dressage and hunter equitation. I've taught swimming at summer camp. I was a big sister for Big Brothers Big Sisters. And if it wasn't for having cancer, I had uterine and ovarian cancer in my 30s, I would have had my children. And it's one of the reasons why I had issues with the gentleman I was with, because he wanted to have another child, and I felt I was stopping him. That said, I would like to make a statement to AJ's mom, children, and friends. It is with heavy heart and great remorse I write this letter to you. First and foremost, I am so sorry that I took AJ's life. I never intended to kill her. The night I shot that gun, I was confused as to why she was screaming and pounding on my door. I had an idea that Israel told her I had hit him. I could not understand why she was so angry. And she truly scared me. Now that I know he told her I hit him, I am just profoundly sad. Not only did a mother die, but a daughter and a sister. I think of your family's loss and know how hard it is to lose someone you love. Not being able to see that person, look at that person, or just talk to that person is such an empty feeling. I so wish I could go back and change things so that she was still here. I would trade my life so that she could be here if it were possible. I know that you have all suffered from her loss, and I have prayed for you and your family during this time so that you can, that God could help you. Nothing I can do will change the outcome. I can only tell you I have cried and I feel horrible for my actions. Please accept my humble and sincere apology for this tragedy.
Thank you. So, defense, have anything else they'd like to add?
Not for witnesses, Judge, no.
Okay. Any arguments you'd like to make as to
All
what's
right, let's bring in our guest. Joining us to discuss, attorney and former prosecutor Tommy Pope. Tommy, great to see you. Thank you so much, as always, for joining us here on the program. And here's what I got to say about what I just heard. You know, she got to the part that I think she should have started with and ended with at the end, But it didn't hit the same for me, Tommy, because she spent the previous, 20 minutes talking about how she was right for what she did and how she felt. And she didn't testify in the trial. She basically testified just now. She was relitigating the case. So when she talks about how sorry she was, I just wasn't buying it.
Mike, I tell you, you're going to have to split the screen, put the judge on one side and you on the other, because you don't need me as a guest anymore. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, I was thinking the whole time she did, all her ailments. I mean, which in a purely legal standpoint, why a life sentence could mean a life sentence. You know what I mean? According to her health and so forth. Then she slid in the long version of some of my best friends are black. Mm-hmm. And then she went to the meaningful one. Like you said, if she had led with that, I think she thinks this is the only time, and it may be true, the only time she's ever going to be in front and get a chance to vent all these things she's been stewing on since the trial. The jury has spoken. For better or worse, the jury has spoken. And if you're looking for mercy from the judge and sympathy, you need to be doing your mitigation and you need to be doing your remorse from the top and quite candidly leave the lion's share of that either out or to your attorney from a health standpoint, those type things.
Yeah. So that's my question. Do you think it's more effective in sentencing hearings for a defendant, if this is what she's going to say, no longer a defendant, but convicted of the crime, if this is the approach she's going to take, would it have been better to say nothing at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, I agree. In the way she handled it, she'd been better off probably saying nothing. But, I mean, again, you could have that potential because a lawyer could state, the jury has spoken, we respect that. She still, maintains she's afraid for her life. In other words, you could have given her the things she wanted to say in a much tighter packaged way that the court is used to hearing, and then let her just do the plea of I'm sorry and I wish it was me, not your mother type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the best approach that I would have taken, Tommy, is explain to the judge why she ended up in that situation. So if you take some of the mental health issues, some of the abuse she suffered, maybe that's why she found herself in that position where she seemed to be fighting with everybody in the neighborhood. She had issues with kids, stuff along that line, which makes you not like her. But if at least you explain some of that and then say, this is why she found herself in that position, but what she did was wrong. And that's not the approach she took. She still feels she was in the right on some level. At least that's what I took from it.
I know. I think you nailed it. I think she wants to feel vindicated and she's hurting herself. I would assume there was an attorney that told her not to do that, and she chose to do it anyway.
So what do you think might be a possible outcome? We know 30 years is the max number of years. The minimum is 11 and a half, although the defense is asking that the judge go below the 11 and a half based on the PTSD, the different ailments that she has, her traumatic childhood, which all of us would agree, based on the sister's description, was a horrible childhood, right? So where do you think it might fall?
I'd be surprised if the judge departs below that 11. Now, I don't know as far as their truth in sentencing if 11 means 11, but I would be surprised just from the appearance of the case because it devalues the victim's life, I believe, if you start going below the minimum. And I believe she, contrary, especially after her presentation, I see her getting up, if not the max, at least up in the middle range for sure, because I don't think she did herself any favors, much like Michael said.
Yeah, I would agree. And you got the 4 children that have been, their mother has been taken away from them. And as for that sentencing issue, Tommy, it's 85% in Florida. So before you become eligible for early release, it's at least 85%. So no way around that. So she'll be serving some time. All right. Stand by, Tommy. We want to take a break right now. When we come back, we're going to hear some of the closing arguments from the defense and the state. So keep it here on Court TV Live.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcox.
And I'm Michael Ayala. We're continuing our coverage in the sentencing phase in the knocking neighbor shooting trial of Susan Lorincz. She faces up to 30 years in prison after being convicted of shooting and killing her neighbor, Ajike Owens, back in June of last year.
The defense attorney is now delivering its closing argument. Let's go back inside the courtroom.
3B and 3E specifically. So just briefly, Judge, we heard from Dr. Castillo. I mean, obviously she testified that Susan Lorincz suffers from chronic PTSD that's not related to substance abuse or addiction, and she's very amenable to treatment in regards to medication and therapy. Ms. Lorincz has had a hard life, and all the traumatic experiences that she has dealt with leading up to this incident affected her capacity to appreciate the criminal nature of her conduct due to the chronic PTSD. In regards to 3C, we heard testimony during the trial from the state's own witnesses that, unfortunately, Ms. Owens did come to Susan Lorinc's home that night, and multiple state witnesses testified that she was banging on the door and the sliding glass door aggressively. Susan Lorincz has absolutely no prior criminal record whatsoever, and by all accounts from the witness testimony here today, she was a productive member of society and has been almost her entire life. She fired one single shot through a door. So it's the defense's position that this was committed in an unsophisticated manner, for which she has shown remorse. I think throughout the trial testimony regarding the letter that Susan had wrote to the children during her interviews, as well as the statement that she has made here today, I think it's clear that she shows remorse for what happened. Based on all the testimony, we would ask the court to depart from the sentencing guidelines and sentence her to, I think it's 538 days credit time served and probation, so that she can get the mental health treatment that she needs as a condition of that. That's all that I have, Judge.
So your recommendation is probation?
Yes, sir.
Credit for 538 days?
That's correct, Judge.
Is there any, from the state, is there any mandatory minimum fines, fees, sentences that apply?
No mandatory minimums, Your Honor.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Your Honor, in regards to the downward departure arguments made by defense counsel, one, the claim that the defendant requires specialized treatment and is amenable to treatment, the state would argue that the defendant's PTSD diagnosis was not the cause of this shooting. We've heard testimony today, and it seems that the area of the defendant's social functioning that has been affected by her purported PTSD the most is her ability to form close relationships. That's not the type of behavior involved in this case. The defendant's worst period of PTSD symptoms were when she was in her 20s. That's about 40 years ago. The defendant has only reported seeking help for PTSD twice in her life that we know of, one in the 80s and one approximately 5 years before this incident. But there's no treatment notes. Just a 4-page document is the only information we have. The defendant, we've heard that she's quit treatment, that she does distrust providers, that she has not stayed with any type of treatment that she's had in the past. And so there's not a reasonable possibility that such treatment will be successful. There's also mental health treatment that is accessible to inmates in the Department of Corrections. And when the defendant made her statement, she listed many things, many problems, including 25 knee surgeries, and a host of other medical problems, but I believe the only mention of PTSD was the statement that I know I have PTSD. So, Your Honor, again, PTSD was not the driving force in this case. It is not a basis for a downward departure. Number two, whether the defendant had the capacity to appreciate the criminal nature of the conduct involved in this case or confirm her conduct to the requirements of the law, and whether or not that was substantially impaired. Your Honor, the defendant had the full capacity to understand what was going on the night of the incident. The defendant took pictures. She took cell phone videos of what was going on leading up to the incident. She knew what was happening. She confronted the children about what was happening. She called 911 and talked about what was happening. She talked about her statements to police about what was going on in the apartment, about being in the bathroom, washing her hands, going to the kitchen, getting the gun, returning and shooting Miss Owens through a locked door. And she claimed she all did it in self-defense. This was not an instance where her nature or her ability to appreciate the criminal nature of the conduct was impaired, nor was her ability to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law or impaired. Again, that is not a basis for a downward departure in this case. As to the victim was initiator, willing participant, aggressor, or provoker, Again, this is not a situation where Ajike Owens just walked over to the defendant's apartment for no reason. There's a history of the defendant having issues with the children and Ms. Owens responding to those issues. The night of this incident followed that exact same pattern, and the course of events were set in place by the defendant engaging with the children. In the defendant's interview, she admitted she told the children on the night of the incident, "Go get your mom, I don't care." Again, Ajike Owens did not walk over to the defendant's apartment with a gun, a knife, or a weapon. She was not trying to break into the house. She was not the initiator, willing participant, aggressor, or provoker. That is not a basis for a downward departure either. Was this offense committed in an unsophisticated manner, isolated incident? Defendant has shown remorse. As to being sophisticated, Your Honor, I point out the defendant had access to 2 guns that night, a 22 caliber and a .380 caliber. She went and retrieved the larger caliber weapon in this case, not the 22. She grabbed the .380. And this was not an incident where the defendant did not know what was going on and fired a bunch of sporadic shots in fear. The defendant fired one aimed shot at the door that struck and killed Ms. Owens. And again, this is not, while the shooting may have been a one-time event, again, this was a pattern of behavior involving the children and the defendant and Ms. Owens in this case. Your Honor, there is no basis for a downward departure in this case. The defendant has failed to prove that there is a valid legal ground to support a downward departure. Based on the totality of the circumstances, the court should not depart. The defendant took the life of Ajike Owens, a 35-year-old mother who was her neighbor, and Ms. Owens was a mother of 4. The interests of justice are best served by sentencing the defendant to 30 years in the Department of Corrections, which is the maximum sentence in this case. So in addition to 30 years in the Department of Corrections, the state would also ask for $100 cost of prosecution.
We need to take a break here. When we come back, the judge issues his sentence. Keep it here on Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
We want to understand the mindset behind your actions in this case. Tell me, why are you here?
She needed payback.
Payback with her life?
Very funny, really. I'm laughing. Did you see me? I laugh.
I don't want any of this. Are you not prepared today to take responsibility for any of your crimes?
Interview with a Killer. Marathon starting Thursday, 11:10 Central. Only on Court TV.
PTSD, which is a recognized mental disorder, and is unrelated to substance abuse or addiction, and that she is amenable to treatment. So I do find she would qualify for that departure. On your second one, the capacity of the defendant to appreciate the criminal nature of the conduct, I don't find there was sufficient evidence to prove that departure. There was no indication that she ever did not understand what she was doing, or that shooting at a person would be against the law, or that she couldn't conform with the law in any way. As a matter of fact, she seemed to be, prior to the shooting, calling the police. So it didn't appear to be any situation where her capacity was impaired in any way. I don't find there's evidence that the victim was the initiator, willing participant, aggressor, or provoker of the incident. Otherwise, although she was knocking loudly in this case, there was no real attempt to get in the residence. She kept asking her to come outside. So I don't find that that departure ground has been met. Despite the existence of one legitimate departure reason, even if she did qualify for the other 2 departure reasons, I would not depart in this case, because I find that the aggravated nature of this case and this offense and the harm inflicted outweighs the mitigation or the departure when I weigh the totality of the whole case. So I find that the seriousness of the offense outweighs any legal departures that could be applied in this case. I'm primarily looking at the harm inflicted upon not only the victim, who of course lost her life, but her family. She has 4 children, all of whom were present during the offense or somewhere in the general vicinity, or at least home. It certainly will have a traumatic impact on their lives for the rest of their lives. They'll live their whole lives without their mother, which I think is a very significant harm inflicted upon them by Ms. Lorincz. When I look at the nature of the offense, I find that the shooting was completely unnecessary in this case. Ms. Lorincz was behind the door was locked. She had already called law enforcement. They were en route. She knew they were en route. She was in a relatively safe position. For some reason, she went into her room and found a gun. She could have stayed in the room and put another locked door between her and Miss Owens, but she came back out, put herself in front of the door, and at the time she fired the gun through the door, she was safe. Miss Owens was simply, although she was clearly banging loudly and was probably very angry over the whole situation, it appears to be she was mostly demanding that Miss Lorincz come outside, which would indicate she had no indication of coming inside the house. So when Miss Lorincz fired the gun through the door, she did so knowing a person was directly on the other side of the door. And she knew that person wasn't a burglar, she wasn't a robber, she wasn't a rapist. She knew she was probably upset about the interaction with the kids, but she had arguments with her before, and no real harm came other than, I guess, a sign was thrown at her, a paper sign. And that's when she decided to shoot. I find that the shooting, when I listened to every aspect of the trial and every aspect of sentencing here, it's the facts don't rise to a murder charge, but they are very aggravated manslaughter. Because this case, the shooting was based, I find, more on anger than fear. I think that's pretty well established in this case. So when I weigh it out, and believe me, I find that, she's a victim of child sex abuse, was a significant mitigating factor. And she has no criminal record, which is also a significant factor. However, we also have a tremendous harm inflicted upon this family and the victim's family. So what I'm going to do in this case is she be adjudicated guilty of manslaughter with a firearm and order to serve 25 years in the Department of Corrections. With credit for 538 days. It's $100 cost of prosecution, $100 fine, court cost. Good luck to you, ma'am. You have 30 days to appeal. Is the defense requesting the appointment of public defender for purposes of appeal?
Yes, sir. Just a few more things I want to put on the record. There was never an offer by the state. The state had asked us to make any reasonable offers. Ms. Lorincz chose not to do that, just for the record. Okay. We also did not file a stand your ground motion for strategic purposes. And that was also discussed with Ms. Lorincz as well. Just wanted to put that on the record. That's it, Judge.
I will appoint the public defender for purposes of appeal. Good luck to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Judge. May we be excused?
Have a very nice day.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, so Susan Lorincz sentenced to 25 years in prison. There was a statutory range from 11.5 to 30, but the defense had gone as far as asking for a downward departure to the point of just probation, which I found interesting. But the judge essentially found that the seriousness of the act, the seriousness of the crime, outweighs any mitigating factors. So 25 years in prison for Susan Lorincz.
That's right, and as you mentioned, she could theoretically only serve 85% of that for good behavior, and that would mean 21 years served. She's 60 now, so she's looking at 81 before she even might get out.
Yeah, let's bring in our guest joining us still to discuss, attorney and former prosecutor Tommy Pope. And Tommy, he laid out a few things for the court. Number one, as far as the mental and the PTSD, didn't think that had any effect on the situation. She fully understood what she did. She shot out of anger more than fear. I thought that was significant. And finally, he didn't find that the victim was in any way the provoker of this incident. I thought that was significant as well. Your thoughts on the sentence?
I thought it was a fair sentence. I thought, he delineated things, I mean, quite candidly, with much more detail than I've heard in a lot of our cases. But he told you where he was thinking. Now, when he led off with recognizing mitigation from the beginning, I think it was the PTSD. I was thinking, man, this may be heading toward a downward departure. But I thought he struck a good balance. He recognized the loss of the kids. And, that's going to have kind of a ripple effect, because not having mother in the house, we talk about stability, not having two-parent households. Well, when you've lost the mother, who is often the anchor of a family, I think, they could create some serious difficulties for these children going forward, in addition to the trauma of actually losing your mother. So, and I noticed still the defendant, it's like she just doesn't quite get it. I don't know if she's just an angry type, but it's almost, you can visualize based on her behavior in the courtroom what happened that day. And basically, she wasn't putting up with that. She went and got her gun, and she shot through the door.
And you made a great point, because I wrote down when he was saying, the judge was saying, it's not murder, but I find it's very aggravated manslaughter, because this was based more on anger than fear. And you're right, Tommy, I was watching her and she was shaking her head no, like he was wrong and her version was right. But I go back when he says, I think this was based on anger more than fear. How much do you think what she said to the court underscored that, or made the judge go that far to say, that's the reason I'm now giving you 25 years?
I was trying to remember, Judge, in the trial, did she testify? I don't think she did.
Nope.
Okay, and so now, the judge has been left to speculate the type of woman he thinks she is, and now she's kind of shown him, with her presentation, and I think it did her no favor. It goes back to what Michael said earlier. What is it, the right to remain silent, but she doesn't have the ability? She probably should have kept it together there,
Yeah, I would agree.
And I got to say, Tommy, I was not impressed by the closing argument made by her attorney. I thought there were a number of places she could have gone. Not sure would have made much of a difference, but I didn't get the sense she cared as much or really was behind the argument she was making.
I thought she sounded, at least, Michael, in her body language a little bit like resigned to the worst scenario. And, you've spent time with defendants to know some of them. You're going to do your job, but you think at some point you see why we arrived here today, in the courtroom, and that, that might be what was happening there.
Yep, so he did not give the full 30. I think the mitigating of the PTSD and the sexual abuse when she was a child, he gave 25 years. Thank you, Tommy Pope, for joining us tonight and helping us break it down.
All right, Tommy, we'll see you.